She said, "I'm staying late at work." Those were the words that rolled out of her mouth with the kind of ease that only comes from practice. And at first I didn't question it. Why would I? We'd been together long enough that staying late was just part of the grind. Something we both had to swallow to keep the bills paid, and the promotions coming. But that night, I don't know what got into me. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was the way she didn't meet my eyes when she said it. Or maybe it was the subtle pause before she grabbed her bag. Whatever it was, something felt off. So I decided to do something I'd never done before. I picked up her favorite takeout, the kind she always craved after long nights. Pad Thai extra spicy, and a Thai iced tea because she swore it gave her a second wind. I told myself it was a sweet gesture, that it would make her smile, that it would remind her she wasn't alone in the grind. But deep down I think I already knew I wasn't just bringing dinner. I was bringing suspicion. I drove to her office building, parked across the street, and just sat there for a moment with the brown paper bag in my lap. The lights were still on in her floor, shadows moving behind blinds. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd walk in, surprise her, and we'd laugh about how I couldn't resist spoiling her. But as I stepped into the building and rode the elevator up, my chest felt tight, like my body was trying to warn me before my mind could catch up. The door to her office was cracked, just a sliver of light spilling into the hallway. I pushed it open quietly, balancing the food in one hand, rehearsing my smile in my head. And then I saw it. Not papers spread out across the desk. Not her hunched over a laptop, tapping away at emails. No, I saw her sitting back in her chair, shoes off, head tilted slightly as she laughed at something I couldn't hear. And there he was, Marcus. Not Marcus from before, not some shadow from a gala. No, this was Tom, her colleague I'd met at a Christmas party once. He was kneeling in front of her chair, his hands on her feet, massaging them like he'd done it 100 times before. I froze. The smell of pad thai suddenly turned sour. The iced tea in the cup sweated onto my hand, but I didn't feel it. My eyes locked on the scene in front of me, and every nerve in my body screamed to react, but my brain just stalled. It wasn't just betrayal I was seeing. It was intimacy. It was comfort. It was her, leaning back, like she belonged there, like she deserved this treatment, like it was normal. The sound that escaped me wasn't planned. It was small, like a cough or a choke, but it was enough. Her head snapped up, her eyes widened, and she saw me standing there with dinner in my hands like the world's cruelest punchline. Tom froze too, his hands still on her feet, caught mid-act. "Babe," she started, scrambling to her feet, shoving her shoes back on. "Don't," I said. My voice was low, calmer than I expected. "Don't call me that." The bag slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. Containers spilling, sauce leaking out. I didn't even glance at it. My eyes stayed on her, then flicked to him. He had the decency to look ashamed, at least for a second, before he stood up, straightening his tie like he could fix what I'd just seen with a neat knot. "It's not what it looks like," she said, the oldest, weakest line in the book. I laughed, but it came out bitter, hollow. "Really? Because it looks like my wife's coworker is massaging her feet in an office at 9 o'clock at night. Enlighten me, what am I supposed to think it is?" She stammered, her hands flailing like she was trying to catch the air between us. I was tired. My feet hurt. He was just helping. I snapped. "That what we're calling it now, helping?" Tom finally found his voice, but it didn't make me feel any better. "Nan, I think you're overreacting." I turned on him, and something in my face must have shut him up instantly, because he stepped back, hands raised like he'd walked into a robbery. "Overreacting," I repeated, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're touching my wife like she's yours, and I'm supposed to shrug it off." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights, the tick of the clock on the wall, even the faint sound of my iced tea dripping onto the floor from the fallen cup. And in that silence, I realized something. This wasn't new. This wasn't spontaneous. You don't just end up with your coworker rubbing your feet at night, unless a line has already been crossed a long time ago. I looked at her, really looked at her, and in her eyes I didn't see guilt. Not real guilt. I saw fear, fear of being caught, fear of the consequences. But not the kind of regret that says, "I wish this never happened." That absence told me more than words ever could. So I didn't scream, I didn't punch him, I didn't beg her to explain. I just shook my head slowly, stepped back and said, "You just showed me everything I needed to see," and then I walked out. The ride home was a blur. I couldn't tell you what streets I took, how many red lights I stopped at, or how long it took me to get there. All I know is that when I sat down on the couch, alone in the dark, I stared at the empty spot next to me and realized it might never be hers again. And the strangest part, I didn't cry. Not then. I just sat there with this hollow ache in my chest, like my heart had been scooped out and replaced with nothing. She came home hours later, tried to sit next to me, tried to start the explanations, the apologies, the rehearsed lines. I didn't say much, just listened, nodding occasionally, because I wanted her to believe I was still that man, the one who trusted too easily, who forgave too quickly. But inside, my mind was already turning, already planned, because if she thought this was just going to be swept under the rug, she had no idea who she was married to. And that's where it started. The shift, the quiet gathering of truth, of proof, of strength. If she wanted to play her games at the office, I was going to play mine everywhere else. Only difference was, my game didn't end with lies. It ended with truth, so undeniable it would leave her with nothing to hide behind. And as I lay in bed that night, listening to her breathe like nothing had changed, I whispered to myself words she'd never hear. "You think I can't handle the truth, but wait until you see what I do with it." Because I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The hardest part wasn't seeing her with him. That was brutal, yes, but clear. The hardest part was pretending afterward that I hadn't seen it. Because the moment you let on that you know, the game changes. She starts covering her tracks, erasing the evidence, flipping the narrative, until suddenly, you're the jealous husband, imagining shadows. I wasn't going to give her that chance. I decided to play along to let her think I was still blind, still trusting, still. So the next morning I acted normal, asked her if she wanted coffee, kissed her cheek on my way out the door, even asked about her late night at work. She gave me some half-hearted story about an audit running long. I nodded, smiled, pretended to buy. Inside though, I filed away every word, every glance, every slip. That was when I started documenting. Quietly, methodically, a text left open on her laptop here, a suspicious charge on the credit card there, Uber receipts that ended a block from his apartment, screenshots, printouts, copy. I wasn't snooping, I was observing. Because if she thought her secret was safe, that arrogance was my weapon. And Tom started slipping too. He'd always been the kind of guy who thought rules didn't apply to him. The golden boy in the office, who smirked his way through meetings. But arrogance makes you sloppy. I saw him once in the grocery store, aisle 6, buying wine with her standing right there. She didn't notice me at first, but he did. His smile faltered, and he looked away. That was the moment I knew they weren't just colleagues messing around. They were reckless. Reckless enough to think I'd never notice. Reckless enough to think there wouldn't be consequence. I played the long game. For weeks, I collected. I didn't just want suspicion, I wanted undeniable truth. Photos, receipts, timelines that lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. And every time she said, "I'm staying late at work," I smiled, kissed her cheek, and whispered in my head, "Stay late, because when this ends, you won't be coming home at all." The breaking point came one Friday night. She said she had urgent reports to finish. I kissed her goodbye, waited 20 minutes, then followed at a distance. Not to her office this time. Straight to a hotel downtown. She didn't even hesitate walking in with him, like this was routine. I parked across the street, heart hammering in my chest, watching them disappear into the lobby. That was it. The final piece. The proof I needed. And here's the thing, I didn't storm in, didn't make a scene. I just took a photo. One photo of them walking side by side into that hotel. Her hand brushing his arm. It was enough. When she came home the next morning, hair a little too neat for someone who'd worked all night, I didn't confront her. I asked if she wanted pancakes. She smiled, said yes, kissed me lightly, and I thought to myself, you have no idea I've already packed your bags in my head. The reveal came 2 weeks later, at a dinner party with mutual friends. I know, cruel stage to choose, but I wanted the truth out where it couldn't be spun back into lies. We sat at the table, wine glasses clinking, laughter spilling around us. She was glowing that night, telling some story about long hours at the office. And that's when I leaned back, pulled my phone out, and placed it on the table. "Funny," I said casually, because I thought the office looked a lot more like the Hilton downtown. The room went silent. She froze, fork halfway to her mouth. Tom wasn't there. Thank God for him, but his name hung in the air like smoke. I tapped the screen once, slid the photo across the table. Her face paled. Everyone at the table leaned in, eyes darting from the photo to her to me. "It's not what you think," she stammered. "Really?" I said, my voice calm but sharp, "because it looks exactly like what I think." The silence that followed was deafening. Our friends shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed, but no one spoke. Because what do you say when the truth is laid bare like that? She tried to recover, to grab my hand, to whisper explanations in my ear, but I pulled away. "Save it," I said. "Save it for the lawyers." And that's when the room really shifted, because the word lawyers has a gravity to it. It doesn't just end conversations, it ends illusions. She knew then it was over. No fixing, no smoothing, no pretending. Just consequences. The weeks after were messy. Tears, apologies, promises that meant nothing. She begged, said it was a mistake, said she didn't mean for it to go so far. But I'd heard enough. I'd seen enough. And every time she tried to cry her way back into my arms, I remembered that night, in the office, her leaning back, laughing, while he rubbed her feet like it was the most natural thing in the world. That image was burned into me. The divorce process wasn't easy. She fought for the house, for the money, for the life she thought she could split in half. But I wasn't the blind man she thought I was. I had proof. I had document. And when her lawyer saw the pile of evidence I'd collected, timelines, receipts, photos, he leaned back in his chair, sighed, and told her to settle. And she did. When it was all over, when the papers were signed and the house was mine and she walked out with far less than she came in with, I stood in that empty living room and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness. Not yet. But peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you didn't let someone's lies define you. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it. If I regret how I handled it. If I regret not fighting for her harder. And I tell them the truth. I don't regret a thing, because when someone shows you who they are, in moments when they think no one is watching, you better believe them. She showed me, and I believed her. Now when I hear the phrase, "I'm staying late at work," I don't think of spreadsheets or overtime. I think of that night, of the pad thai gone cold in a paper bag, of her head tilted back in laughter that wasn't mine to share anymore. And instead of pain, I feel clarity, because sometimes the worst betrayal is the best gift. It frees you from living a lie. And if I could go back, if I could speak to myself, sitting in that car, outside her office with dinner in my hands, I'd tell him this: "You're about to see the truth. It's going to hurt. It's going to break you. But one day you'll thank her, because this isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of the part where you finally stop being blind." And that's exactly what it was. The beginning.